All right, let's give it up for Kirsten Helvey from Cornerstone OnDemand.
Same.
So thanks for coming up from
Thanks
LA. This is a treat.
You are a wonderful host and your team. This has been an amazing event, and I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So this is fun for a couple of reasons. Cornerstone's an interesting company. It's one of the early, was Cornerstone always SaaS from day one? I think
Day one.
Day one, right? So it's pretty much the early 2 or 3 companies that have been doing it. When was Cornerstone founded?
1999.
1999, right? Did we even call it SaaS in 1999?
What's interesting is, and I started in 2003, March of 2003. My primary role as an account manager, so think about this, there were roughly 30 people. We had 8 customers, and I came on as an account manager. My primary job was to sell SaaS already to companies that we had already sold, right? Because we were dealing with large enterprise customers. SaaS was very new, and we spent our time talking about what it was and the benefits, which I no longer have that conversation today. I have different conversations, but that was the focus, because back then, nobody was really adopting SaaS.
So what are the maintenance fees again? You've gotten it wrong.
Exactly. Hey, there are none. Oh, guess what? And back in the day, I won't tell you how often we released, but we did it more than we do today. And little to no change management. Did I admit that on stage? Now we have robust processes, and everybody gets their seamless updates. We have one code version. And it's been a good ride.
So you have an amazing story. So you join one of the sort of iconic SaaS customers early as employee 30. You join, you go through that, you eventually run the whole customer success organization, which is super important topic we'll talk about. IPO, 2,000 employees, and now you're COO, right?
Yes.
So it's quite a journey, and I want to briefly talk about like all the things that have changed, right? What changes from 30 to 2,000? And you've had an amazing seat, right? And that seat has changed over the years.
Yeah, it really has. And firstly, I'll say when I joined, I did not know what I was getting into and didn't really even think about it that way. For me, I wanted a job closer to home and didn't want to be on the road 24/7. So I found a company and I thought, that job's a no-brainer. I'm down. Enabling technology, I'm kind of good at that. Business process, I'm in. And after that, getting on the ground, starting, and really understanding what the company was about, I set out to really make some changes because of my consulting background. And I think one of the things that we needed to do was marry up all those business processes with our customers to the solution that we were selling. And that journey has taken many turns through the years. It's changed a lot. My role has changed a lot. One of the good things is I make a lot of mistakes, and I move on from those, and I think that's key, right? The evolution is you have to keep changing what you're doing, being agile. And somebody just asked me yesterday, right, not the thing that I hate about my job, what's the thing that I like? And the like is the building. And as a startup, you're building. And I think the fallacy is when you get to a certain size or scale, you stop. And if anything, it's more important to keep building and keep changing how you're operating, whether it's interfacing with your clients or the market, right? Even your competitors, right? Co-opetition is life. That's the way we do things. And I think the journey along the way, one of the things for me is that I fundamentally believe if I don't learn something new every day, then I need to go be doing something differently, because that to me is what life is about. It's about experiencing. So I've been able to kind of put those two things together with my job. And while I do the non-sexy HR stuff, it's something that is so important to companies as a whole, right? Because employees are your greatest asset. We've heard a lot of talk about culture, through all the sessions. Hey, guess what? Stop talking about it. It's table stakes. If you don't have culture, because culture is about your people, right? So I'm always fascinated that we talk about the culture, and that's table stakes. And it's not about a ping pong table or an arcade or a candy wall, and the candy wall is on my floor. I don't really like that. I wish they'd put the candy wall on a different floor. because I like candy. But, those are things, it's about the people, and it's about connecting the people. You're at war, right? You need to be in the trenches. You need to trust each other. Yeah. And that, to me, needs to be inherent. And if you don't have people who are signed up for that, yeah, they shouldn't be there.
Let's dig in on that a little bit, because it's interesting, because I agree with you. And you've been at Cornerstone from 30 to 2000 as COO. I love to hear the stories of the founder that wrote the 7 principles and on the Google Doc and posted it, and that was magic. But I think it's table stakes and doesn't matter either, right? The employees are the culture, period. It doesn't. The color of the foosball isn't. But so Cornerstone has managed to have an enduring culture, and it's managed, and maybe it's a benefit to do it in LA outside of S. But what do you say? How do I create a great culture for my company? Everyone here has something. Everyone, consider for most of the folks here are a lot like Cornerstone when you joined. And they probably have a good culture, and so how do I build a great culture?
Yeah, and I think what's most important is that you acknowledge it and then work hard to maintain it. And, my boss, Adam Miller, who is the founder and still is the CEO today, always had a vision, and I think that vision drove the culture. And I'm really lucky that I had someone who cared about the vision of what we were doing, and that it was a lifelong goal for him. At the time, it was educating the world. Right now, we're about realizing people's potential, and that evolution has changed slightly, but educating the world and helping people realize their potential are not that far off. So I think the one thing is, you gotta have a mission and stay true to that mission, and everybody needs to be there for that mission. Now, we've made mistakes along the way, because as you get to certain stages, you start hiring people for different things, right? And I think that's where you need to be really certain of what you're hiring for each stage, and you also need to be certain that folks that are going to get you from A to B may not get you from B to C, and so on. And I think taking a step back, I heard a lot of that. It's absolutely true. You need to evaluate at all times, at all stages, who's on the team. Are they the right people on the team? Because you always have to be a step ahead and committed to that vision. So you have to follow the vision. You need the skill sets and the people to follow that vision.
And how do you, and let's talk about that a little bit. And we talked about it a little bit with Phil before. I've got these great people on my team, but then I hit 10 million, 20 million. You've seen the whole journey. How do I think about great employees, but they're not in the right fit for the next stage, right? But they're great. They're A players. I'm loyal. How do I deal with that scenario?
So I think that Cornerstone is actually particularly good at that, and in the unsexy HR world, we call that talent mobility, and I think we're very good. Most people at Cornerstone have had 3 to 4 jobs at Cornerstone, and we, especially if they're talented people, we'll move them in a role that they're better suited for at that time, right? Look, some people, you just got to cut bait. And in some cases, they self-select out because they realize it. But I think offering the career paths and the mobility is critical, especially for folks who have done an excellent job for you at that period, right? There's probably something else that they can do and be, a superstar at. I think what happens also in the startup world, you got a lot of A players, and the culture is A player. The other key thing is you tend to have a lot of individual heroes, especially, right, as you're growing rapidly. And then what happens, there comes a time where actually an individual hero is a detriment to your success. And you gotta make that switch, because then it becomes, it's no longer I can get that done, because the I's don't scale, the we's do. And having people who can make that transformation is critical. And personally, I've had challenges. I think Adam, my boss, will tell you I've had some bad years, but I've had some good years, and hopefully he'll say mostly good years. But part of that is that journey of being able to scale and having the foresight to know what you personally, right, are either not good at, or maybe you're not scaling, and having that self-awareness to then change that. And I think that is critical as you go through the stages. The other key thing as you become an individual contributor to a manager, making that switch. Some people are successful, and some are definitely not, right?
How do I know, if I'm an individual contributor here, how do I know when I'm ready? And how do you coach people?
Yeah, I think part of that is having that plan with your manager around making that switch and understanding exactly what it takes to be a good manager. And that goes back to one of my sayings is, forget the MBA, get a psychology degree, right? If I give anybody any advice, and that's my next reincarnation, I'm going to be a psychologist to all you startups, right? Because it's all about people, motivating people, helping people achieve their goals or realize their potential. And, that is communication, right? If you can't communicate what you want and how to get there, I had one employee who, for many years, was the go-to person, not scalable. Things were breaking down, and that person didn't understand why, he was not getting promoted. And finally, we created a plan, right? And that plan is we tried to give this person direct reports, and it failed. And the one thing we did was create a clear path and plan, and we measured it and monitor it. And now that person, superstar manager, doing really well. But there was a point in time where we actually took a step back and we're like, what are we going to do with this person?
Yeah.
And
how much longer did it take her to grow eventually into a good manager? How much longer than she'd hoped? How long was that time?
Yeah, look, I think it took a lot longer than that person.
Couple more years.
Couple more years.
Couple more years.
Yeah,
right.
and part of that, though, is the lack of self-awareness, right? And I think that, I don't know, if you can do anything for yourself, take a look in the mirror, right? Know what things are going well or not, and people will tell you. People will tell you if you're being successful or not, and what are the things that you need to change if you ask. They may not proactively share it with you, but if you ask them, they'll give you that direct feedback. And on my team, everybody knows, I'm pretty direct with the feedback, good and bad. And I'm an equal opportunity jerk, as it will, that you got to give the feedback.
It's meritocratic jerkiness, right?
Yes,
it comes from honesty in the right place. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a related question. I see this especially often in sales, but I think it happens in every functional area. Related to this point, I see someone that's killing it as an individual contributor. They need a couple more years seasoning to be a manager, but they're not going to listen. Like they have to, and even though they love Cornerstone or wherever, it could be any company, they've got to be a manager tomorrow. Like what's your advice? How do you manage that one? And they have such drive, they've got to do it.
Yeah, firstly, I always love the drive. I love the people who want to go after it. And as my boss Adam always says to me, you always like the disruptors. Yeah, I do. I like the people who are going to, shake the boat, rattle it. Because that's how we get our best work, right? Is when we're thinking not about the norm, and a lot of that, around all of that, is that one-on-one coaching. I often tell people to go talk to people in the roles that they want, and what are the things that that person does to be successful. All of this is people. It's the people business, and a lot of folks, you can learn some of that, and some of it you can't. Like, I'm all about street smarts, right? You got to be street smart. You got to be able to read a room. You have to know, how to adjust either in, a sales conversation, a service conversation, or even an internal conversation. And those skills are really what's paramount. And having people focus on some of that and looking in the mirror is one of the key things that I do. I have told some people, look, you're just not ready, right? And sometimes they need to hear that. And if they choose not to take that advice, and in some cases they'll leave, right? That, hopefully you've taught them a lesson, and that lesson will help them in their career moving forward, right? Sometimes you have to fail, and a lot of the times they fail, right? And then they want to come back.
Yeah.
And,
Are they allowed back?
Certain folks are allowed back, but as a rule, we have a policy that, in certain departments, no, you're not coming back.
Varies by the department. Yeah.
Right.
Let me ask you a related question, because this is such an interesting conversation. The other one that I think a lot of founders struggle with, so one is if someone can't scale to an existing role, you try and find them another place they can do, which is great. That's how you build an enduring organization.
Yes. A
related one is, how do you approach the tough topic of topping someone, right? And for some folks, it's not tough. They just are like, I'm gonna top Linda tomorrow. But for most of us, it's a tough thing to think about, right? And so how do you top someone? What's your advice to that to that challenge?
Yeah, that is actually a tough question, and
Here's your boss, Linda.
Yeah, yeah.
I know you didn't even meet her before today, but now she's your boss. She's the
like
RSVP.
one of I've had that happen, and I've also been the person who has come in over.
Yes. Well, you're the COO, so
right?
apparently
So
you've been a topper,
early
right?
in my career, I actually became the boss of my boss. Super awkward, by the way.
Yeah, super
and,
awkward.
Look, there are conversations that need, have to be had, and it's all about the vision and getting to that next stage, right? One of the things that I try to do, and it's really hard in today's environment, like you can't think 3 years out, right? Crap, I think 6 months out from a goal standpoint because everything's changing so quickly, but I need to know where do I need to get to? I'm a dreamer. I'm a dreamer as an individual. I always have this in my head, this big thing out there that I want to achieve. And part of that is having those conversations, getting people to know what that big dream is, related to business. Sometimes it's personal too. And having those discussions, right? I do them directly. I don't like to beat around the bush. And, I always give the folks the opportunity to go along for the ride. But part of, I think, the one thing that we don't hear so much, and I had this conversation last night at a meeting, is nobody tells you all the bad stuff you have to deal with, right? In startup land and scaling and growing. And, having to have those tough conversations with folks about, whether or not they can scale, it's tough. And
how transparent should you be?
Look, I think in some ways you have to be transparent. It's better for the individual, and I am a no bullshit type of person. I rather tell you straight. I think, I think it's better to have people know where you stand than to surprise anyone. Like, that's just not good, because guess what? It's a small industry, right? Technology is very small. You will always run into someone whom you've worked with, that knows someone. So I think if you can do it graciously, classy, and it's never about putting the individual down, it's about the business. It's never personal in the sense of, it's about you, the individual, right? I always try to focus on where is the business going and what do we need to drive the business.
Fair. There's something, let's ask you, because a lot of us struggle with this. When you go to make a hire and you're just not sure, you hire a VP or now director, whatever. I hope that in a year you grow and you're still the VP, but I just don't know, right? You're an overachiever, you're a stretch hire. Do you tell that person that's hyper ambitious when you hire them that I don't know if you're going to be the VP or the director in a year?
Yeah, absolutely.
You tell them even on.
I think you absolutely let that person know, because you got to give them the motivation to really be at their best and perform the best. And a lot of times I will hire people, especially into new things we're creating, and I will say, I don't know what your path is, but trust me, if we're performing and working together, I will create a path. And I think that is truly important. I think transparency overall, you have to have it, right? Because that goes back to our beginning discussion around people. People are your biggest asset, right? And you want to keep the people who are driving the vision of the business. And one of the ways you do it is you treat them with respect.
So let's, I want to make sure we spend some time on customer success. Because I had to figure out what the heck customer success was. I didn't even really understand it until like year 3. Because then you get real renewal, like year 3 of a startup, you start getting real renewals and you start getting real churn, right? And so you've seen customer success, I think, go from something that was sort of account management to a hack thing, and now we're trying to make it a science. So what is state of the art in customer success today, and what's changed?
Yeah, I think firstly, when I got hired to save a big customer.
All right.
So that was the sole purpose for my existence.
You have one account.
Well, I ended up having 8. But you've got one account, and it's up to you to save that account. So I think that we've always had customer success. Now it's grown into something different. But, knock, knock. If you don't have customers, you don't have a business. Right? So I think there's always been, I love what Phil said about the cocaine of a new sale, right? Well, I have always been about the crack of the clients, right? And hey, your clients are your biggest, they're your business. Make them successful. Focus on your clients. And I think along the way, part of what I have spent my time at Cornerstone is really evangelizing that client-centric DNA. So start with it, right? Don't be a product company. Be a client company. Be a company that is, providing a solution or solving a problem for your clients who, by the way, pay your bills, right? I mean, that to me, I'm kind of logical, not that bright. No, I'm just kidding. But, it's just logic, right? And I think that along the years, we've done many things, and I think the best thing we did is make the investment, right? It costs a lot less to upsell than to acquire new customers.
A lot less.
Right? So I think, knowing that and spending the time, I'm particularly proud of our retention rate. We're at 95, just above 95% dollar-weighted retention rate, which, since inception, right? And I think, we focus on really delivering the right experience, and it has changed. Actually, it almost changes every year in a lot of ways because based on, wonderful new technologies and data, right? Now we're all software and data companies, and it's what do you do with the data to help you drive your business? And customer success today is about knowing, right, the science of your customers and knowing all aspects. Back in the day, we tracked it on spreadsheets. Yeah, that sounds about right. Now it's very metrics-driven, and thankfully to some of the new SaaS companies out there, you can automate a lot of it, right? And having that touch, right? The one-to-many is obviously the way to scale at, when you have thousands of customers and depending on the segments, but every client is important. And having that focus, no matter how big or small, and we've got some whales and we have very tiny customers, they all need to feel that they're getting value and that you are giving them what they need to be successful. Because at the end of the day, the outcomes of your clients are what you need to hang your hat on, right? Of course, it's new sales, but those new sales need to translate into multi-year contracts. So I think the focus on that retention and the renewals is critical, and there's often, right, a significant amount of revenue to be tapped in that install base. And, one of the things that Phil mentioned too was, a lot of times you don't focus on that, and it's right in your feet. It's right there. It's in front of your face. So knowing that and focusing on it, and setting up the processes to support it is critical.
And when you're running customer success, were you focusing, Adam, on it? Did you have to compete for mind share? Did you give them quotas and budgets for customer visits? Or how did you get the resources that you needed? Yeah,
so I think that, in particular, Cornerstone has been good at understanding, working with our clients. Services as a whole has always been a laggard to anything sales related. It's just the way you grow your business, right? You're not going to spend the money that you don't have on necessarily servicing versus acquiring, right? So it is a balance, and it is about figuring out how to do it, right, with less. Like, you're always going to be behind on resources, right? So you have to be able to, and that's why some of the new science out there is amazing, because you can do what you need to do with fewer people and still have a very high touch, very personal connection with your clients. And I think one of the things about Cornerstone, many of our clients say, we buy you because of your people. So you want to have the people touch, which obviously costs more, but it's balancing that with automation and science to really create the right methodology, and ultimately being able to show a retention rate, an uptick in renewals. All of our CSMs are bonused on a number of those metrics, so it's in their best interest to get a renewal or have an upsell.
And how do you juggle those two? Because sometimes renewal and upsell, there's a conflict.
Yes.
Right? Listen, I love the upsell, but the last thing I want to do is lose GE or Google as a customer. So what did you learn about that conflict between upsell and renewal?
It's a lovely dance, a nice waltz together. And, look, it's really a partnership. Our client sales team, or account management, really does all of the renewals and truly the upsells. But the client success team is the business development team for the account management team. And that's critical, right?
Okay, so walk us through that.
So
what does that mean in practice?
If you think about it, right, this client success manager is responsible for developing relationships at certain levels, right? In our world, they're responsible for the utilization of our solution and really making that solution sticky. Right. And number one is helping clients realize the value and the outcomes that they expected. So that's their number one objective. But with that, they are uncovering the needs, right? Because we're talking about, what are the goals of that organization? How do we align? So out of that, the opportunities flow. And so connecting the dots and having that close partnership with account management or client sales, whatever you call those folks in your world, is critical. And they should partner, whether it's meeting weekly or doing it with a solution, however, that works for you at your particular scale. When you have large teams, and we now have, fairly large teams. I mean, I think my team alone is a third of the company, right? You have to facilitate the relationship building internally to benefit the client, right? Those relationships have to happen to then benefit clients.
So one last thing I want to get in, because we're over in time, but when you and I were talking before, we had a great conversation, because you've gone from employee 30 to COO. And especially for folks here that are VPs and driven folks, about lessons you learned about promoting yourself and raising your hand and being recognized versus being the heads down and meritocratic, right? How do you, if you want to be successful, how do you promote yourself? And does this get easier? And what do you have to do to become a COO?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I would argue that I actually haven't done a great job at that. So I do have a lot of lessons learned. I was always focused on doing a good job.
Doing a good job. You'll be recognized.
I will be recognized. And yeah, it just doesn't work that way, right? It just really doesn't.
Necessary, but not sufficient, right?
Yes, and why do I say that? Well, it's because you have to articulate your value and the things that you're bringing. People aren't just gonna see it. And part of that is relationships, right? I think one of the ways that I more recently is having those relationships and partnerships and being a trusted person, but then being able to translate that. And I think for me, one of the defining moments was when I finally realized, you know what, I don't need this shit anymore. If I want to leave, I will. But I don't want to leave because I love this. I love what I do. And having that attitude, I think actually changed really how I perceived myself and the value of what I was doing and where I could go. I think that was a very defining moment. I'm also, a mother with kids, young kids, and I think that happening in my life forced me to be way more specific about how I spend my time and what I really wanted. And I think ultimately I go back to, I love what I do. I love the company. I love the people there. We have a foundation that, really embodies what we do. And I would never leave my job for another job, right? Because I have an awesome job. And that, I think, is something you got to look in the mirror and figure out, right? Is this what you want to be doing? And I said before, I'm a dreamer. So I put stuff out there. And then not even consciously, I have stepping stones to get there. And I make decisions, that, lead me down a path. I think if there's one thing I learned too, a little bit of luck helps. So, make sure you're on the lookout for the luck or, the introductions and the people. And, SaaStr Annual is a great place to do that, right? Is making those connections, because that will lead to either a next step or luck, whether it's in your current role or your next role. And, creating that web, there are people who do that wonderfully, and I would say focus on that.
Yeah, everyone's got to get better at developing that web.
Yeah.
That was a great idea there, right? It's great advice. Kirsten, thank you very much. This was terrific.
Thank you.
Yeah, really great. Thank you.